Welcome back to Legends May Live, where we explore the strange, the mysterious, and the downright eerie. I'm Drew, and today's story covers something so heartless, it's hard to believe it really happened. On December 27th, 2011, in Troy, Missouri, just after 9 p.m., Russell Faria is pulling into his driveway after a long evening with friends. A light, dusty sprinkling of snow was falling and making everything feel a little quieter than usual. Russ trudges up the driveway with plastic grocery bags swinging from his hands as he tries to ignore the freezing cold air seeping through his jacket. Inside the house is dark, except for the faint flicker of a television screen coming from the living room window. Strange, he thinks. Betsy, his wife of over a decade, usually leaves the light on for him. But today was a tough day for her, so he thinks maybe she just dozed off without thinking about it. Russ steps inside, and immediately he thinks that the house smells odd. It's like this melted wax and something metallic, but he can't quite place it. He calls out for Betsy. No answer. Moving toward the living room, he sees the TV's flickering light cast long, unnatural shadows, and then he sees her. Betsy is lying on the floor. At first, he tells himself that she's just asleep, but as he steps closer, the horror becomes undeniable. There's blood everywhere, across her wrists, her neck. It's pooling around her body in dark, sticky puddles. Her slippers are still on, a glass of soda's knocked over nearby, but Betsy isn't breathing. She's cold, very cold. Russ calls 911 immediately. He's frantic. He's screaming, "My wife, she's dead, she's dead. There's blood everywhere. Please send someone, please." And by the time police arrive, the scene is chaotic. A grieving husband, a brutal murder, and questions that seem, at first, to have easy answers. But what no one realizes yet is that the real monster may not be who they think it is. From the very beginning, police zeroed in on one man, Russell Faria. After all, who else would have had a reason to kill Betsy? Russ and Betsy had been married for over 10 years, and for the most part, they had a strong bond. It's hard not to with that much time together. But that bond was recently strained by sorrow. Betsy had been battling breast cancer, and over the past several years, she had undergone chemotherapy, lost her hair, and fought valiantly through the chaos and pain that she was now all too familiar with. And although her prognosis had briefly improved, just weeks before Christmas, her doctors gave her devastating news. The cancer had returned. This time, it was terminal. Russ tried to be strong for Betsy. He attended her chemotherapy appointments when he could. He picked up her medications, made meals, and tried to keep the house together. But friends said the weight of it all, the emotional and financial stress, had worn them both down. They felt like they were fighting a losing battle on every front. One that some questioned if Russ may have wanted out of. On the night of her death, Russ claimed that he had been out with friends for a game night, playing Rollmaster, a fantasy board game, from around 5 p.m. until about 9 p.m. He even had receipts showing where he stopped for cigarettes and dog food before coming home. It seemed like a rock-solid alibi, but police weren't convinced. In his 911 call, Russ sounded frantic. They thought perhaps too frantic. Investigators noted he repeatedly mentioned that Betsy had killed herself, even though the scene with 55 stab wounds screamed otherwise. As detectives scoured the home, they found a pair of Russ's slippers splattered with blood. What they didn't find were signs of forced entry or signs of a struggle. And perhaps most condemning of all, Betsy's life insurance money, $150,000, had been recently altered to name a single new beneficiary. Russell Faria was arrested just 4 days after Betsy's murder. He was charged with first-degree murder and armed criminal action. Prosecutors painted a simple but brutal picture. A husband overwhelmed by his wife's terminal illness snapped and decided to end both of their suffering. At trial, the evidence was about as straightforward as it gets. Blood on Russ's slippers, his odd behavior during the 911 call, his motive, life insurance money, and ending his wife's suffering. The prosecution barely mentioned Pam Hupp. Pam was one of Betsy's closest friends, or at least that's how she described herself. She told police that she had been the last person to see Betsy alive that night. She had driven Betsy home after a chemotherapy session, tucked her in on the couch, and left. Even when it came to light that Betsy had changed her life insurance policy just 4 days before her death, removing Russ and naming Pam as the sole beneficiary, authorities didn't blink. Pam insisted that she and Betsy had a special bond, that Betsy wanted her to use the money to care for her daughters. No one pressed her further. Russ's defense tried to raise doubts. They pointed to Pam's ever-shifting stories. They pointed to the suspicious timing of the insurance change. They pointed to the fact that Pam had inserted herself at every key moment, including insisting that Betsy needed a ride home that night, despite Betsy already having plans with her mother. But none of that mattered. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before Russ Faria was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. To a lot of people, it seemed like justice had been served. A dangerous man was off the streets and a tragic case was closed. But something was very wrong, and the woman no one thought to question was already setting the next part of her deadly plan into motion. Russ Faria sat behind bars, convicted of murdering the woman he loved. His life was shattering, even beyond what he could have imagined, and his reputation was destroyed beyond repair. But on the outside of the prison walls, cracks were beginning to show, and it started with Pam Hupp. Pam's version of events, the night she drove Betsy home, was riddled with inconsistencies. At first, she told police she simply dropped Betsy off and left. But later, she claimed that she stayed inside for over 30 minutes, chatting and helping Betsy get comfortable. Even more disturbing, Pam had forced her way into every part of Betsy's final days. She had insisted on being the one to drive Betsy home from chemotherapy that evening. She had encouraged Betsy to make her the sole beneficiary of the $150,000 life insurance payout. And afterwards, Pam kept changing her story about what the money was supposed to be used for. Pam first said it was for Betsy's daughters. Then, when pressed, she admitted she felt no legal obligation to hand the money over to anyone. In fact, she kept it. And then there were the emails. Betsy told friends that Pam was smothering her. Pam was becoming obsessed with her, and it was beginning to scare her. Betsy felt like Pam was trying to control her life, and she was afraid something bad might happen. Despite all of this, investigators had never searched Pam's house. They never seized her phone and never seriously questioned her about her movements that night. They fixated on Russ. They decided he was guilty before they ever looked at the evidence, and they missed the dark figure standing right in front of them. Russell's defense team pushed harder. They filed appeals. They dug up cell phone records showing Pam's location that night didn't match what she told the police. And slowly, piece by piece, the entire case against Russ Faria began to fall apart. By the time the truth started leaking out, Pam Hupp was already preparing to kill again. With Russ's conviction falling apart, Pam Hupp needed a new plan. And this time, it would be even more shocking, even more brazen. In the summer of 2016, nearly 5 years after Betsy Faria's murder, Pam set a trap. She concocted a plan to frame Russ Faria once and for all. But in order to pull it off, she needed a patsy. Pam posed as a Dateline producer, offering quick cash to people willing to do a fake reenactment for a show about 911 calls. She approached a vulnerable man, 33-year-old Louis Gumpenberger. Louis had suffered a traumatic brain injury years earlier. He had difficulty walking, talking, and thinking clearly. Pam decided that he would be easy to manipulate. She told Lewis that she had a job for him, which he happily accepted. It felt good to be useful, and for a moment his excitement put a little extra skip in his step. She led him to her car, and she said that she would take him to where they would be working. So Lewis got in and smiled as he looked out the window, thinking about what he would do with the money and wondering if this might lead to future work. When they arrived at Pam's house, she guided him inside to the living room, where she pulled out a gun and shot him in the head. He immediately crumpled to the floor. Lewis was dead. Pam planted a fake note on Lewis's body, a note claiming that he had been hired by Russ Faria to kidnap Pam, retrieve the missing insurance money, and to kill her. It was clumsy, obvious, and desperate. Police saw through it almost immediately. Cell phone records showed Pam had been trolling the neighborhoods looking for vulnerable people to lure. Surveillance footage caught her lying about where she had been, and her entire story unraveled within days. Pam Hupp was arrested for the murder of Louis Gumpenberger. Facing the death penalty, she entered an Alford plea, maintaining her innocence but accepting a life sentence without parole. Russ Faria's conviction was officially overturned. He walked free after spending years imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. And as for Betsy Faria, justice has moved slowly. Only in 2021, a full decade later, was Pam Hupp finally charged with Betsy's murder. She's pled not guilty, and as of today, she awaits trial. Thanks for listening to Legends May Live. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and send it to a friend that loves true crime. Until next time, remember, sometimes the most dangerous monsters aren't strangers lurking in the shadows. Sometimes they're the ones you trust walk you home.